On today's show, part 2 with myself and Wes Morton, talking all things Summer League and Pascal Siakam. All of that is on the way.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1524 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening into Tuesday. This is actually going to be part 2 of 2 with my friend Wes Morton of Peachtree Hoops. So if you missed part 1, I encourage you to listen to that one first. And that should be in your podcast feed of choice right now. You're on YouTube or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. This is, again, part 2 of 2 with myself and Wes talking about Summer League, as well as some Pascal Siakam talk here at the end of this part 2 conversation. Please stay tuned for the rest of this convo. Check out Wes's work and much more. And without any further delay, here's myself and Wes with part 2. The rest of the guys, before we get to some Siakam talk at the end of this thing, obviously the roster guys, unless you have real takes on the likes of Brady Manick or Kabengele or whatever, we can leave those guys to the side. They're probably going to be huge factors moving forward. But Mohamed Gay, Tyrese Martin, Beat Krejci, Seth Lundy, Miles Norris. We talked a little bit about Lundy in particular, Norris in particular earlier. I guess we start with Gay. What do you make of what you saw? Because I do think that first game, people got very, very, very excited, and I understand why. And the flashes were really intriguing also, but he has a tendency to kind of disappear at times. Like, what did you make? I don't want to put words in your mouth. What'd you think of what you saw from 5 games of Mohamed Gay?
Yeah, honestly, for a guy who's a second-round pick, it's fine. Like,
yeah.
You saw the flashes. You can see the upside, certainly.
Definitely.
The fact that he's got, ability to someone hand the ball and pull up and shoot. He had a couple Dirk sort of fadeaways, one leg sort of things, and had a couple really nice passes, really advanced reads, finding guys who were cutting. But like you said, it just didn't kind of go away. I mean, I don't think his stat line's really gonna knock anyone's socks off. But I mean, like I said, he's a developmental guy. You draft a guy 39th overall. You're not expecting him to just step in and be, obviously got saw a lot of, future Pascal Siakam, ironically enough. I
think my favorite take, my favorite take of the whole week wasn't, the future ones are fine. I get that. People dreaming on what he could be, I totally understand. My favorite one of the week was that I had someone tell me with a straight face that they thought he was better than John Collins right now. And I was like, you've literally lost your mind. I'm sorry. My apologies. And that's not even me being pro Collins. It's John Collins is an NBA starter and Mohamed Gay is not.
Let's surprised that didn't come from our Slack, but
yeah, of course. But no, it was one of those things, and I get it. It is fun to dream on these guys, and I think he's the perfect example of a player where the Hawks were telling people like me, at the draft, that is not a draft pick for right now. Seth Lundy is much more of a maybe we'll have to use this guy this year kind of draft pick. He's much more short term, although he has some long term appeal too. But they didn't draft Mohamed Gay for his rookie season.
Right.
He got the 4-year deal because they think that in 2 or 3 years he actually might be a real guy for them potentially if it all goes well. That's why you do the long term contract versus the 2-way for Lundy. But I think we did see, in my opinion anyway. I don't think Mohamed Gay will be a guy that you see a lot of this year in Atlanta. I think he'll be spending a lot of time in College Park, as he should. And I think that there's lots of appeal. I mean, the Hawks like him a lot. I can tell you that right now. The Hawks are very in on what he could be. It's just going to take a while, I think.
Yeah, I think it's he's the guy who's perfectly made for the highlight tapes, but
yes,
he's still got a long ways to go on little things, a lot of kind of basic defensive mistakes and the things that, if you're watching a 3-minute cut up of the game, you're not really gonna if you're a fan of the Hawks, you're watching the 3-minute cuts of the game and thinking what this guy could be.
That's exactly right. And especially defensively, you mentioned that because the blocks are really impressive. He's got great length, great athlete, but there's this thought that he's a center and he's really not. Defensively especially, he is not ready to play center. Even on offense, he's really playing more of a wing in a lot of ways, always a small ball 4 kind of floor spacer role. I know he's 6'11", but he's not a center. And I think we all kind of saw that. The Hawks have acknowledged that. He started next to it. He played next to a center. There was one stretch, I think, that he played a little bit of center, and the Hawks got killed because he was not ready to anchor that defense. They tried it once, but I think that he'll be playing next to a center in College Park a lot, which makes sense. That's what he is right now. Maybe long term.
I think it is either 3rd or 4th game, but it was basically every single drive they were going right at him and get a foul. And he just like Buffkin also has to like bulk up and get into a sort of conditioning program. Like he's like
Definitely.
Like you said, 6'11", 215. Like, it's going to take a little bit of time. But like I said, I mean, the Hawks see him as a developmental piece. I think it's pretty clear you're not expecting anything out of him year one. Like he's going to be in College Park for the majority of the time. I would imagine once he kind of gets optioned there.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Because I know you're a sicko like I am, I will ask you about what I think is I hesitate always to say that it's a direct battle, but it's pretty intuitive that Tyrese Martin and V. Krejci are maybe battling for one spot. Maybe. I'm not saying that's definitely the case, but it could be that way. Tyrese's guarantee date is later this week. What did you make of the two of them? Because Tyrese had the one big game. I think he had 24 points or whatever it was, had a bunch of fourth quarter moments. It was really good. The rest of the week, not so good. Veet had flashes to people like you and I, like the little stuff, like the passing, but he didn't blow anybody away with the same kind of volume that Tyrese had either. So it was kind of interesting, like parallel on what those guys actually are. But I wonder who do you like more, I guess, at this point in time is the ultimate question. But what did you make of those two guys this week?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because they're kind of like you've sort of touched on. They're sort of polar opposites in a way.
They're not very similar. Yeah.
as far as the way they want to go about like play, because Tyrese Martin, whatever game it was against the Timberwolves, where I think it was 25 points. Where
he was going hard.
He scored the bulk of it in the fourth quarter. The fourth quarter is like give me the ball. He was able to take guys off the bounce, get to the rack. Like he's a guy who, at least in this format, he scales up really well. Just because he's kind of just physically more mature than a lot of guys, at this level, and he's got the handle, he's got the passing, the creation, and kind of just like the ability to get into the lane and hit some tough shots. Whereas Krejci's more like I'm gonna pass first guy. Like he's still kind of hesitant to look for a shot unless it's like kind of a layup or a three attempt, but Krejci had, like you said, he had some, incredible like whip passes and all this other stuff. But not to sound too harsh, but both of them, even both of their archetypes are almost like there's still something's kind of missing as far as being an NBA wing, because that's what they are. That's what they need to be. They're both 6'5", 6'6", like a wing. If you're not, Martin hasn't shown the ability to beat NBA guys with his handle. So if you can't do that, you kind of need to like scale down your volume and spot up and shoot.
Yeah.
But neither of them you look at like, okay, they're floor spacers, or maybe Veet and Martin have some sort of connectivity to them. Like they can move the ball somewhat well, but they're just not really threats to space the floor around higher creation guys like Trey DeJounte. They kind of excel in this format because they're more advanced. They've got some years under them, but I think at the NBA level, I just don't think they're going to be able to do that. And it's just a different step up to go in the NBA.
I was going to say, I think that quarter of Martin kind of getting his own shot is both a good thing and a bad thing. Like, I think it's a reminder that like that's the way he wants to play, and he's not really good enough at it. And I think that's also, as far as like a guy in his mold trying to earn a spot, I don't think he's good enough at that in general. And then there's another bar you have to clear to be good enough to have a team want you to do that, if that makes sense. Right. Like, I don't think anybody's trying to run stuff through Tyrese Martin in the NBA. Now, granted, Summer League, he did what he needed to do in that Summer League. I'm not saying otherwise. He played well, but his limitations are, like, I think he profiles. I'm not saying this is definitely the case. He's kind of that guy in between where he's not quite good enough at the stuff that he's good at. And it's not a knock on him. He was a second round pick. That's a very typical thing. He doesn't kill you anywhere, but he's not a great shooter. I think defensively he largely is okay, but he's not a game changer there either. Veet's a little bit longer, a little bit taller than Tyrese, not quite as strong. Veet is much more of like the guy that I think was more valuable in offense in the NBA as a supporting piece, because he's a really good ball mover, really good passer. The problem with Veet is that he doesn't defend. Like, that's the problem there. Like, if he was a better defender, I think he'd be a very clear like guy to keep around. It's just that Martin doesn't have a ton of like weaknesses. It's just that his strengths are not huge and the shooting is a question. Veet's defense is rough. I don't know. I think that just contractually, I keep leaning to like, I think it's more likely that they keep Veet because he's not guaranteed till January.
Right. Yeah.
If they want to get Veet in training camp, if they want to go somewhere else, they can cut Veet. Then if they want to, if I had to guess right now, I think I would probably not guarantee Tyrese this week. If it was me, I think they probably won't if I had to guess, but we'll see. I'm not reporting that. I don't know. I've asked people and they will not tell me just yet as we record this podcast, but I think that's unfortunate for Tyrese that it really might come down to contractual deadlines.
That's the good thing I want to bring up. Like you said, so, Martin has an option. Like it's either you pick him up and now he's guaranteed for the whole year, or, KG, they can keep his guarantee dates not until league-wide date, January 10th, I believe.
Yep.
So you can keep him. You can even bring him into next year. Maybe there's a trade that kind of opens up. You might need some salary filler or, whatever. It gives you a little bit more flexibility as opposed to just having, if you pick up the option on Martin and, maybe somehow he's not in your plans later. Like, that's I don't know. Like I said, maybe it just depends on kind of, what team they're trying to put out there. Like I said, if they're really, really gung-ho on having as many, good ball movers who don't need to, look for their shot. Like you said, V would be that guy because he can kind of keep it, keep the ball humming on offense. But, then you think about defense, he's still, pretty skinny kind of guy. So
he also rolled his ankle in the 5th game. I don't think
that's true.
I don't think it's going to be a serious one, but I don't know. They told me pretty quickly he was going to be ruled out for the game. It looked like just a pretty normal ankle sprain. So it's mid-July. It's probably a good time to do that. If you're going to have an injury, it's probably a good time for it, but something to throw out there. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. If you're into daily fantasy sports, you need to check out the award-winning app at PrizePicks. PrizePicks Daily Fantasy made easy. It's awesome. I've been playing there for years now, honestly. It's very easy to use at PrizePicks, whether you're doing it for the first time or you're a seasoned veteran like I happen to be. At PrizePicks, all you have to do is choose 2, 3, 4, or 5, or even 6 players, and then decide whether you actually have more or less than a certain number of points or rebounds, or maybe total yards in the NFL, total bases in baseball, strikeouts, etc. From there, with 25 times the money on your entries, it's just that easy, honestly. They offer numbers on all kinds of different sports, from the NBA, college basketball, college football, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, etc. And a whole entry will be done in just a minute or less. It's that quick. Plus, it's just you against the numbers, making it very easy to evaluate what's going on at PrizePicks. They have safe and fast withdrawals, and they're operating in more than 30 states now, plus Canada as well. Go to PrizePicks.com and actually download the PrizePicks app right now. It's on Blend Daily Fantasy Sports. If you're a first-time user, get 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. Again, that promo code is locked on and sign up for this deposit match up to $100. Check it out now, either on the PrizePicks app or prizepicks.com. Okay, well, unless you have more to add on Seth Lundy or Miles Norris, unless you have takes you want to get off your chest, I do want to get to Siakam before we get out of here. I realized this, I told you before we started recording, because of my challenges with internet in Las Vegas, I haven't talked about Siakam with anyone on this podcast. It's just been me kind of not doing the same thing every day, but close to it. It's like, I'm sure you had the same feeling too, this never-ending cycle of Siakam machinations that are like slightly different every day, but not really overarchingly different. So I'll just open it up to you. What do you think of Pascal Siakam as a trade target? And then B, like, does that mean you think the Hawks should do it? Or also, like, do they draw a line? Like, there's kind of two discussions. Like, okay, do you want Siakam? And then if the answer is yes, how much you're willing to give up for him? Because that's kind of the two main things.
Right. I mean, on some level, you want Siakam. Like,
sure,
he's a good player. Like, there's a price point where you say, like, oh yeah, I'll definitely take him on my team. Like,
sure.
But obviously, the price to give him to get to take him in. I mean, that's a question. Obviously, you would, ideally, obviously, not want to just trade something you really value for Siakam for 1 year, and the Hawks, in my mind, aren't one player away from maybe you make that swing, go for the fences if you're one player away. Obviously, the Raptors did that with Kawhi a few years back, but. If you were to trade for Siakam, you would need to have kind of a plan of what you're going to do now, and then a plan of, okay, maybe he wants to hit free agency, but have some conversation of being in your long-term plans. So for that reason, I really wouldn't give up anything that would that you would consider like a future asset. So any sort of picks, maybe outside of say a couple of seconds, or any of the young players, because I just think the Hawks of the franchise aren't really at that stage. They still need to be thinking long term. I mentioned today, like they got a good long term win when they signed DeJounte Murray to a contract where I think you look at what Van Vliet got over $40 million a year, and it was a little shorter contract. But I think a lot of people think DeJounte himself may even say, I feel like I'm comparable, even better player than Fred Van Vliet. And with obviously the cap going up next year when he would have hit free agency, he could have been looking at, definitely north of $40 million per. But for the Hawks to sign him to a $30 million per deal, you got him locked in for the next 5 years. That's a win. So it's kind of like if you make like a long-term win, like you want to keep playing in for that, I think it would do them a disservice to do sort of a short-term move. So again, I think the only structure of a Siakam trade would obviously be built around, a guy like DeAndre Hunter, who's got 4 more years on his deal for $80 million. And, there's obviously kind of some question of, does he really fit Quinn Snyder's system? I think Snyder wants a little bit more versatile forwards who can, more shoot decisively and pass decisively. And not sure DeAndre Hunter really fits that. And obviously he provides a lot of defensive value. And then the other one to kind of make the salary match would be Clint Capella going out. So the big one coming out of Mark Stein, I guess it was yesterday or whenever, was Sunday that Dallas is still kind of sniffing around Clint Capella. Like they're still looking for that center to, upgrade their centers there. Obviously to bring in with Luka and Kyrie. So if they were to somehow work through a 3-way deal, like I think that's kind of the common sort of structure of it, where maybe Hunter goes to Toronto and Capella goes to Dallas, and obviously there'd be a lot of other pieces kind of moving a different way. But in my mind, if I'm the Hawks, like I would try to protect any of the long-term assets. Even Buffkin, I've seen a lot today, the last couple of days, where people are like kind of okay with moving Buffkin to Toronto. And like I said, I haven't. The summer league hasn't really changed my long-term opinion of him. I think he'll still be a pretty valuable piece. And I think he's kind of the perfect complementary player, I think, to piece around a guy like Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, again, which you have locked in long-term. So
yeah,
I wouldn't be in favor of moving Buffkin, just for the fact that obviously he's a young guy. He's not making that much money. I think you're kind of giving up on him for what would look like it's 1 year of Siakam, and then negotiation with him in free agency.
The big thing is the stuff that you and I probably can't know, and it's the smoke that's out there about Siakam. And I think I've heard this beyond just the reporting, that he and his camp are trying to make it seem like he doesn't want to go anywhere else. And that means, it could be posturing. That could be the case. But if you're the Hawks, the hardest thing for me to see is that Toronto should ask for a lot. He's very good. It's 1 year, but he's very good. I don't think the Hawks can pay what I would describe as market price for him without thinking they have a really good chance to extend him. Because if you think there's a decent shot, it's 1 year, you can't give up, multiple future-facing assets plus Hunter and Siakam and Capella. That's just it's a lot, man. And like I think in a vacuum, if you think that Siakam would sign a 2-year extension or something right away, you can give up more. That's fine. I mean, I'm not over the moon about it, but Buffkin's an interesting one. Another thing I was going to ask you about this, like sort of this discussion, is like who would be off limits for you, because I think everyone kind of assumes the Kings pick is a very natural thing to include as a sweetener. The Hawks can't trade their own pick this year because everything else is kind of off the table. They only have one future pick they could trade, is 2029. So the Kings pick is an obvious sweetener. But then like after that, Raptors fans want like a Kongwu and Griffin, right?
Right.
And Hawks fans want to maybe throw in Buffkin, if that. And it's like an interesting balance, because I do think that Buffkin is probably below everybody else on the young guy list, which for me, everybody else is Okongwu, Griffin, and Johnson. I think Bey is a sneaky one in there. I'll just say that like I've heard him a lot more in discussions behind the scenes than I've heard like Hawks fans discuss him as a throw-in, because like Bay's extension eligible. And I think if you go get Siakam, yeah, Bay would help you with the shooting and all that stuff, but like you might not have money to pay Saddiq Bey. So like maybe it comes down to like, do you want to keep Kobe Buffkin or Saddiq Bey? That kind of thing versus someone like Griffin or because I think Okongwu is not going. If I had to guess, I'd be shocked if he got traded. I think Griffin and Okongwu are in the category for me anyway, where I'll be shocked if they get traded. I think after that, Jalen, there's a little bit of discussion about like overlap with Siakam, Buffkin, Toronto seemingly wants, etc. Like, how do you feel about like where you draw the line? Is it just like the Kings pick? Would you do if you had to do Buffkin? If you had to do Bay, like, where would you kind of draw your line in the sand?
So one thing about the Kings pick is, I believe you mentioned this, it actually gets more valuable if the Kings don't make the playoffs. The protection
is better, yes.
Yeah, they start.
But the risk there is if the Kings become the Kings again, which I don't think is going to happen, but if they become the Kings again, it could become 2 second-round picks. Like at some point, it doesn't become unprotected; it becomes seconds. I do think that they become pretty good seconds if that happens, but that wouldn't be very sexy. So yeah, I think it's very funny that the Kings made the playoffs this year for the first time in forever when the Hawks didn't need them to, and now they need them to this coming year. And like I think the Kings might make the playoffs, but they're not a lock to make the playoffs. So it's interesting kind of balance there.
Yeah. I mean, it's just I mean, like you said, that's basically your only tradable asset, a first rounder other than 2029. I mean,
yeah.
So you brought up Bay. I mean, Bay and Okongwu were both extension eligible. You know, obviously, at this point, I would imagine there's been some contact as far as, you know, what both sides want out of an extension. Like, the Hawks have some idea of, you know, where they're at. So that's something that would inform, you know, okay, well, if Bay's camp is asking for too much, you're more willing to let him go to Toronto, for example. So, you know, that's something that I don't have knowledge of. You know, you may have, you know, some
I've heard
sourcing,
nothing big. And I do think just because like it hasn't come up in a while. Generally speaking, I know Isaiah Stewart got done in the last week or so.
Yeah, that was really quick.
But most of the time, it's the max guys early, and everybody else waits until close to the deadline. Like the Herder extension happened very late. It was in October. Like the Hunter extension, same thing. It was in October. So like I like Okongwu and Bay, Okongwu more than Bay, but no matter what, like neither one of those guys is like super easy negotiation. Where like the max, like Anthony Edwards is just like, okay, here's the max, Anthony, like just take it, it's fine. Yeah. Trae Young's what he's got done was just he signed on July 1st. It was the max, it was easy. Okongwu was very difficult because he has not started, but we all know he's the starter basically in terms of like value. Bay a little bit more tricky, but I think that they probably exchanged numbers, they probably talked a little bit, but I hadn't thought about like, maybe that does play a part as far as like, not with Okongwu, I don't think, especially if you trade Capella, then you can't trade Okongwu.
You can't. Right, can't do both.
But Bay, all I'll say is, without going too far, I do think that there is a bigger possibility that Bay is in this trade than people have talked about it being. Because most discussion that I have seen is basically Hunter and Capella, and then it's like which young guys or assets go out. And it's usually a discussion about Buffkin or the Kings pick or Jalen or whatever, and no one talks about Bay. I think Bay has a decent chance to be in the trade if it happens. Again, if it happens, I'm not saying it's going to happen. The one guy I'm very, very, very confident, like 99% will be in the trade is Hunter. Everything else, we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, so that kind of gets back to, like I said, me personally, you know, maybe I'm just a little bit more down on Siakam as a player, or B, more pessimistic on, you know, his chance of, you know, trying to you know, either negotiate an extension or you know, sign another contract with the Hawks. But I don't think I would go beyond Hunter and Capella. Like I said, you know, obviously Toronto's going to ask for more. But, you know, in my mind, I think you could maybe part with some of the guys who are closer to their extension. So again, I brought up Bay and Okongwu, maybe Jalen, because he's only 2 years away, as opposed to Griffin, who's 3, and Buffkin, who's 4. But
I do think, by the way, this is an Andrew Kelly thing that I think you might have seen us talking about this. I think there's 2 schools of thought on Jalen, because beyond just him being a good prospect, but as far as like, there's the one thing about him and Siakam kind of overlap a little bit, which I think is true on offense in particular. But if you're trading Hunter, this is a point that Andrew made. I don't think he'll be bothered. I'm sharing this publicly, but it's because it's a good point. If you trade Hunter, you kind of need Jalen's defense on the perimeter. Like, and
Right.
I don't think Jalen's like an established perimeter defender yet. But if you look at the roster, if they trade Hunter, there are no established perimeter defenders like on the team. Like, they don't exist. So, I mean, I guess maybe if Murray bounces back, but that's kind of it. I mean, it gets not that Hunter's a great defender, because I don't think he is. But like, it gets real ugly on defense if you put Hunter out, and I think you have to put Hunter in the trade. That makes a lot of sense. But Siakam's not going to he's not a lockdown guy at this point at 29, and he's more of a power forward, etc. There's lots of different things you have to balance.
Yeah, exactly. That's why again, I would. Yeah, you definitely need Jalen. I think certainly his defensive potential is, probably maybe the highest of any of the perimeter guys on the team right now. Like,
he also gives you a lot of downside in terms of like, there's a chance. I'm not saying it's likely, but there's a chance Jalen makes you look really silly, like really silly, because his actual upside, like his 100 percentile outcome, is an all-star, and like that's the kind of deal that like, you might look very stupid. Yeah. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but right. Organizationally, you probably do think about that. Like, okay, what's the worst case scenario here? And the worst case scenario with trading Jalen is that he really blows up, which could happen.
Yeah. I mean, I know to some degree that could happen to, obviously Okongwu. Like I said, I don't think Okongwu's moved, but like he's like he was a number 6 overall pick. Like, the potential's high. And AJ Griffin, who was locked in the top 10 before he kind of fell from injuries. Like, so that's why I'm at the place where the Hawks kind of need to. I still think they need to be patient and build long term. Like I said, they got the win with Murray. So the thing that actually kind of, I don't think I've really brought up yet, but there's already kind of fit questions with Trey and DeJounte. How does Trey, DeJounte, Siakam fit? Like, I feel like that could compound them trying to work through some of their issues they've had as far as space on the floor and playing off of one another, playing off the ball. Like, you throw Siakam in the mix, is that a guarantee that that's gonna fix things? Like, that might even you might get a situation where yes, you've got 3 probably top 40 players, but they don't fit very well. The result is it's kind of a less than the sum of a part sort of thing. So I got fit questions with it as well. So again, that kind of brings me back to I think the Hawks are they've kind of been you mentioned it there, other executives, other people around the league have looked at the Hawks as their team building has been interesting. We'll say
they get poked fun of in national circles sometimes.
Right. So I think now is the time to be a little bit patient. Not saying necessarily take a step back. They don't want to take a step back. Like, they want to push for a playoff appearance and all that. But you've got some decent young guys you've drafted. You're looking ahead. You're not going to have a lot of first-round picks in the future. If you kind of shell everything out for Siakam, and then the fit is very questionable, then you're in kind of a world of hurt. So that's why I think that I land a lot lower on the prospect train. Siakam's a great player. Like, he is. Like I said, I think he's certainly top 40 to probably top 30 player in the NBA right now. Obviously he'll cross into his 30s very soon, but I'm not sure that the Hawks are really in the right place to be, including a lot of the assets that they do have, knowing that they're not going to have future assets in 2024 or 2025, 2026. They swap with Spurs in 2027.
Yeah. They're out some future capital for sure. So I think it's a move where we can talk about this for 2 hours and maybe we'll come back to it later on, but it's there are lots of different factors in play. It's like, how good do you think you're going to be if you do this trade? I think you have to be pretty confident you're going to be very good in the short term if you do this trade, if you're the Hawks. Not that any team's not confident, but you know what I mean? Like, given where they've been the last 2 years in the play-in, you got to think you're a 50-win team at least to do this trade, I think, given the short-term nature of his contract, all that stuff, that your future money, all that too, and what you're giving up. Plus the future draft picks, the Trey and DeJounte thing. For me, the DeJounte and Pascal fit is the one that's kind of more questionable than Trey. So it's lots of factors. I do appreciate you talking to me about it, though, Wes. We've done it for an hour plus. At this point.
We've covered just about everything we could.
I think we could. I mean, again, I think you and I could probably do 30 more minutes on this, but I'm going to try to self edit and sort of give me a part 2 with this podcast. But anyway, thanks for doing it, man. I really do appreciate it. Please plug all that you have going on. We talked about Peachtree Hoops at the very beginning of this conversation, but please tell people where they can find all of that. Your work on Twitter, both personal. Are you on Threads now? I don't know what you're doing social media wise. So share.
I am on Threads. I mean,
Perfect.
I haven't really touched it in about a week, but
same.
But yeah, so recently took over as managing editor of the Peachtree Hoops. So I think number one, please visit peachtreehoops.com. We'll be right throughout the off season. We'll be plugging, whatever pops up as far as the rumor mill and things of that nature. But you can find me on Twitter at BlogHawk. I believe I'm on Blue Sky as BlogHawk, but I've got my links sort of pinned to my Twitter page. So like I said, hey, me and you, we're sickos. We're even though that the basketball's ending, we're still going to be we'll still try to engage the fan base and all that. So yeah,
I recommend following Wes at the absolute highest level. There's a community over at Peachtree Hoops. It's a fantastic place to check out. That's lots of Hawks fans read it and comment, and also great stuff from Wes and Graham and Glenn whenever he checks in there, and the whole staff. So it's a great product, and I do appreciate giving me all this time on a Monday in July, Wes. We'll have to do this again later in the offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
As for everybody else, please subscribe to this podcast. Again, one more time, peachtreehoops.com for Wes's content, ratings, reviews on this pod, etc. Spread the word. And like Wes said, we're not going anywhere in the near future. So stay tuned, and we'll see you all next time.